So no one wants to think about this, but what happens to your trust after you die? Will it perform the way you envision? Have laws changed which will make it harder to carry out your wishes? My goal is to help you sleep at night knowing that your trust really will carry out your wishes. So I really want to walk you through the steps that are required after you die. What happens with your trust? Hi, this is Ellen Cookman. Welcome to my channel. In this channel, we're going to talk about how to help special needs families set up estate plans. Estate planning for special needs families is complex, and our goal is to make it as easy for you as possible. If this information is helpful to you, please subscribe and also hit the notification button so you'll be notified every time a new video comes out. My law firm has helped hundreds of families navigate the complex waters of setting up estate plans. So I'm excited to share all of my knowledge and experience with you. So there's this myth out there that says something like, once I set up a trust, things just automatically go from the trust basket down to the next generation. It's like there's a magic wand somewhere. Unfortunately, that's just not the case. There are actually quite a few steps that are required to go from your trust to those that you love who are inheriting the assets. And I want to walk you through these steps so that you can get a better idea of what this looks like and also where an attorney can be very helpful in this process. So I made a diagram that I hope will be helpful to you, that we can walk you through just generally what a trust administration looks like. All right, so first, this is what I do when I have a client who's maybe, let's say their parent recently passed away and the money is going to be going to that person. They are the successor trustee. First, I'll have an initial meeting with them and we'll talk about the situation and what happened and make sure that we've collected all the information. We have an intake questionnaire that we send out to get everybody's addresses and birth dates and mailing information. Then there's a few things that you need to do with your trust. The first thing is you need to get a separate tax ID number for the trust. When somebody dies, their social security number typically doesn't work anymore. So they need a new tax ID number from the time of their death to the time that the assets are actually distributed out. If there's any assets in the trust that are generating income, that needs to be reported. So we'll get a separate tax ID number. There's certain things that are required by the county and by the state of California to be done for a California trust administration. You need to lodge the original will of the deceased person. So the wet signed ink, that's the one original document you really need and you send in to the county office. The probate code requires that you provide notice of death to the Department of Healthcare Services and to the Franchise Tax Board, just in case the deceased person owes any money for Medi-Cal benefits or if they owe any state taxes. They may not, but you need to send the notice anyways. If the deceased person owns any real property, you have to send notice to the assessor's office that someone died and where the money will be going. And also if there's any creditors, you need to send them notice as well. So these are all things, just really step one of administering a trust. There's a lot of entities and organizations out there that you need to let them know what's happening. So once your parent has died, their trust typically becomes irrevocable. This is if the second parent has died or if they're single, right? Their trust becomes irrevocable and you need to send notice to all the beneficiaries that a trust has become irrevocable. And then that starts the statute of limitations for the time that they can complain about the trust or they can contest it. So that's stage one that I think of as the notice part. The next part is really digging into the deceased person's assets, all right? So if you look at stage two, that's where we ask our client to send us copies of all the bank statements from the time of death. Okay, so we want to get, if they died on April 21st, we want to get the bank statement from April 1st to April 30th, which covers that time period. We also want to get date of death valuations for any assets that have securities in them. Then, if they have real property, usually we need to get an appraisal to find out what was the value at the time of their death. And usually we do this for capital gains tax purposes. And I'll talk more about capital gains tax in a different video. Then for that real property, we typically provide the county a notice called an affidavit death of trustee to let them know that the person who is acting as trustee for the trust has died for the real property, so title changes. and there's a few other documents you need to do. Then we usually put together, and every attorney might be different, but we usually put together a spreadsheet containing all the assets that were owned at the time of death, how they were titled, and what their values were, because that can easily be provided to the accountant who's going to be preparing the fiduciary income tax returns. So they need to know all of this information. So that's stage 2 in a nutshell. Now, keep in mind, I'm giving a very broad overview of all of this. So, the devil's in the details, but I do want to just let you know what you're up against. So stage 3 really refers to the distribution process. So first, before distributing, you need to see if everyone who's the beneficiary will waive an accounting. The probate code allows everybody to get an accounting, which is basically a step-by-step informative guide of how much money was there when the person died and how much is there at the time of distribution and what happened to all of it, what came in, what went out. It can be a pain to prepare and it can cost a lot of money. So a lot of times we recommend that be waived, but some beneficiaries are not able or willing to waive it. So then it needs to be done. So if this is a married person and the surviving spouse is still alive, typically everything needs to be retitled so only the surviving spouse's name is on there. If this is a second death, we're actually dealing with distribution of assets to the next generation. And this part can get pretty complicated, and that's really where you need an attorney. Okay, a lot of these things I have my paralegals help me with, but this distribution part, it involves capital gains taxes, California property taxes, estate taxes, income taxes. It can be very complex. And so we usually dive in and we give you advice on who should get which kind of assets, what does the trust provide for, how do we keep California property taxes low if possible. We cover all of these things. And then you actually distribute things by retitling the assets, filing a grant deed that shows the new title, that sort of thing. You provide a notice to the assessor's office of what happened with real property. And usually our trustees have a reserve to pay for accountants' fees, anything that comes up. God forbid if somebody's suing each other in litigation, we have a reserve for that. And then we can wrap things up and we're done. So you can see that this process is quite complex. I don't recommend that you do this at home. This is not DIY. You really need an experienced estate planning attorney. There's a lot of estate planning attorneys out there who only do the drafting and they don't do the trust administration, because really you need a team to do all of this. But we love helping people with both their own estate plan, or if somebody else did their estate plan, we can still help with the trust administration. But our goal is really to get the money where the deceased person intended it to go in the most efficient and happy way possible. So hopefully now you can sleep easier at night, knowing what happens to your trust after you pass and what steps your children need to take to make it happen. If you have additional questions on trust administration in California, please give our office a call so that we can help out.